Thank you, Delphine. Thank you for that moving introduction, for speaking so eloquently on a difficult day about Thaisa and your loss. And I want to thank all of you here who have fought so hard because you've lost somebody, because you've been a survivor of gun violence. You've made sacrifices that are hard to give enough recognition to. I want to say maybe a special note here of thanks to the coalition of organizations and people, whether you belong to an organization or not. You've been part of a coalition for good. And just because we're signing this today doesn't mean there isn't more to do. But this particular bill is very important, and Don Harmon, who I've known and been friends with for 27 years, and so many others have made this possible. I want to certainly quickly recognize the public officials, some of whom have spoken here today, but others of whom are here. Of course, Representative Kathleen Willis, thank you for your leadership in the House. To Representative Camille Lilly, Representative John Carroll, Representative Justin Slaughter, again, thank you for your leadership in the House. Senator, let's give them a round of applause. Senator L.G. Sims and Senator Kimberly Lightford in the Senate. And of course, Kwame Raoul, who was in the Senate until recently, and thank goodness now is, I get to call him General Raoul. And to Mayor Emanuel, thank you for your leadership of the city, for your leadership on this issue and fighting against gun violence every day. And a side note, because lots of individuals in this room deserve individual recognition, but just because I've known them for some time and respected them and worked alongside them to fight gun violence, I want to recognize my friend Phil Andrew, who's got me involved in the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence 25 years ago, and to Father Flager, who every day bespeaks the power of God standing up for people who have lost so much. Thank you very much, Father. Even when there are setbacks, the resolve of these people never wavers. Law enforcement officials from across Illinois who stand on the front lines protecting Illinoisans every day are also victims of gun violence. They demanded the tools that they need to do their jobs. This is one of those tools. Every day they risk their lives to keep communities safe and strong. They serve and provide the security that so many take for granted. So they too deserve credit for the passage of this bill and the fact that it will come into law. Gun violence isn't just an issue facing one city or one region or one group of people. It affects all of us. This room filled with survivors of gun violence, law enforcement, community groups, advocates, and faith leaders is a testament to the widespread impact of gun violence. Too many Illinoisans know the pain of that violence. Today is a long overdue step to do more to prevent gun violence, to make sure that guns don't fall into the wrong hands, to make sure that we license gun shops just like we do restaurants and other businesses, perhaps more so because they deserve to be regulated. And this is critical. The reason for it is to deter straw purchases. so that we can prevent someone from buying a gun for someone else who is not legally allowed to own a gun. Many of the incidents of gun violence that occur, as you know, in our city and all across the state occur with illegal guns. This goes directly at that problem. These are common sense public safety reforms, no less than that. Dr. Martin Luther King spoke of the fierce urgency of now. While we've taken an important step today to protect children and families from gun violence, every day forward we must act on Dr. King's entreaty. Now is the time to restore funding for local organizations and programs that interrupt violence before it happens. Especially in the communities where so many of these organizations had to shut their doors over the last 4 years. Job creation, trauma-informed mental health care, and after-school programs are absolutely vital to reducing gun violence. Yes. Now is the time to stem the flow of illegal guns across our state's border, which are used to commit crimes in Illinois every day. I've already reached out to the governors of the states surrounding Illinois, and I'll work with them to confront this challenge. Now is the time to ban the weapons of war from our streets. And like bump stocks, trigger cranks, they need to be outlawed once and for all. Real change is possible, but only if we work together and we listen to each other. That's how we made the progress that you're seeing today. Over many years, the fight that Senator Harmon waged was because he listened, and because so many people who joined this Coalition for Good listened to each other to finally make this happen and work together so that we could accomplish this goal. That's how the progress was made, and that's how we'll make progress going forward. That's how we'll build safer and healthier communities, working together and listening to one another. That's how we'll save lives. And that's what today is all about, the lives that we will save going forward because we get to sign this legislation into law and prevent more violence on our streets. Thank you very much. So as I mentioned earlier, the gun violence interruption programs have really been decimated over the last 4 years. And yes, I want to make sure that we're seeking to fund those programs, as you know, in places like Springfield, Illinois, not to mention Rockford and elsewhere. But in Springfield in particular, the violence interruption program literally had to shut down entirely. And what did we see when that happened? Gun violence increased significantly. So it's very important to me. This is a relatively, less expensive thing to do when you think about all of the ways in which to prevent gun violence. That's a very important thing to do. So we'll be focusing on that. And then, as I mentioned, there is, of course, a ban on bump stocks that we should pass in the state of Illinois, even though there's a federal regulatory endeavor that was announced. That could be reversed at any time. So we should pass it here in the state of Illinois, not to mention trigger cranks and other things that we can talk about. So those are things that I think you'll see in legislative form over the course of this coming session, I believe.
Governor, you mentioned that you had conversations with neighboring states as it pertains to straw purchases. Can you explain what those conversations entailed? What came out of those conversations?
I initiated conversation. I only took office two and a half days ago, so I don't want to overstate. But I spoke with several of the surrounding. I have calls into every one of the governors. I've spoken with several of them now to initiate conversations so that at a policy level we can begin to work on cross-border, interdiction to make sure that guns are not crossing over into Illinois or the other way. And to make sure that we have programs in place that will help to reduce the scourge of gun violence, not just in the city of Chicago, but we have borders all around us that we need to protect from the intrusion of guns, illegal guns. So that's what I'm initiating the conversations about.
Beyond bump stocks, would you support an assault weapons ban?
Mike, sorry.
Assault weapons ban, would you back that this year?
I don't know that that will be a bill that gets introduced this year, but that is certainly something that we need to look very strongly at. You know, the assault weapons, the weapons of war, as I like to refer to them, don't belong available to the streets of Illinois.
In your state of the state, you refer to the abdication of responsibility with regard to guns. What exactly did you mean?
Well, I was referring to the abdication of responsibility in general that has occurred by prior leaders. And with regard to gun violence, of course, we need to make sure that we're funding the programs that reduce gun violence. I talked about that, and make sure we're banning the kinds of weapons that shouldn't be allowed. So that's really what I was referring to.
Last question.
Mary Ann.
Can you react to the Illinois State Rifle Association? You, as well as the superintendent, they are saying today that this is a doubling of bureaucracy, that feds already do this.
No, that's not true. That's just untrue. The provisions in this bill, for example, provide that there needs to be surveillance so that we know who's coming in and buying guns, so that we, again, can prevent and prosecute straw purchasers. There are a lot of provisions of this legislation that do much more than the federal government does, and that are an expression of the values of the people of Illinois. They're just wrong, and you know, I'm going to continue to make sure that we're standing up to the voices like the Illinois State Rifle Association and the National Rifle Association to protect our families and our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Look at some of the faces here. I've been in your living rooms. I've been around your kitchen table. No parent should ever have to bury a child. It's not right. And I do want to say to the governor, I want to thank you for figuring out in 4 days what some other people couldn't figure out in 4 years. You don't need a PhD from Harvard that if you're going to regulate a barbershop and a bar, maybe you should also regulate a gun dealer. And that... Now, I didn't know you went to Northwestern, so you have some of that sophistication. But like in 4 days, you figured out something that some people couldn't figure out in 4 years. And I want to compliment you for that wisdom. That also, you know, in the last 2 years, our police have seen a 28% reduction in gun violence working with the community leaders. It's January 16th. We're not even 16 days into the year, 17 days. We're not a full month. Our police have already taken 465 guns off the streets of the city of Chicago. 40% of those guns come from right here in Illinois. That means that we need the support of the state of Illinois to making sure that the neighborhood here and around Austin, that when our kids come here to this great school, on their way, they can be thinking about their studies, not their safety. And we have a governor who's actually taken the state of Illinois and all the authority of the state of Illinois and says, we're going to make sure that these streets, these sidewalks are safe for our children. Thank you, Governor Pritzker. Barney Frank used to have a great quote. When they were talking about legislating prayer in school, he said, as long as there's final exams, there will always be prayer in school. You don't have to go to that. I do want to thank you, though, and a serious thing. You've taken one step. We have our police department working with our parents, our principals, and our teachers. I also want to compliment the principal because also we have BAM and WOW, a mentoring program, here in our elementary schools, making sure that our kids have a mentor, making good choices, so later in life they can look back and be proud of what they've decided to do rather than regret what they decided to do. And when you have mentors, police officers, parents, the state, all doing what they're supposed to be doing, our kids are going to grow up be not only healthy, making good choices the rest of their lives, and we're going to be really proud of them. And the person that also then, against the gun lobby, really led this fight, because 4 or 5 years ago, 2014, we passed this bill in the city of Chicago. He made sure that the very same spirit was now the law of the land in the land of Lincoln. Senator Harman has been tireless in making sure that this became the law. I want to thank the senator, knowing full well this is not a Chicago problem. This is not a Chicago and suburban problem. This is a problem that requires the action of the state of Illinois, and he has led that effort. Obviously, give a warm welcome to Senator Harman.
Thank you, Mayor. Principal Bell, thank you for having us here. It's great to be in the district. When I first introduced a version of this bill in 2003, 16 years ago, I thought we'd be having the celebration a little bit sooner. Apparently, I had been underestimating the importance of an engaged, dedicated, and committed governor. So, Governor Pritzker, thank you so much for making this happen so quickly. Also, when I first introduced this bill, it was a part of a package of bills that the mayor's office asked us to introduce in Springfield. And I have to say, Mayor Rahm Emanuel picked up that torch and brought it to a new level of enthusiasm. This would not have been possible without the partnership with the city. So, Mayor, thank you so much. And I noticed that one of my former colleagues, Senator Kwame Raoul, now our Attorney General, who was a co-sponsor of this bill with me for many of those years. And I'm so excited to have someone in the Attorney General's office who has walked that walk in the legislature and is going to be committed to enforcement and expanding our efforts to prevent gun violence. So it's a great team, and this really is such a team effort. 16 years is a long time, and it's time to celebrate, but just 2 points. I can't even imagine how many kids we've lost in the last 16 years because of political dithering over whether or not we should do this. And we can't lose sight of that. And we can't think that this bill, however important it is the solution. It will help, but there's more work to be done, and we need to remain committed to doing that. I ask for all of you to remain in this fight. This is something we have to stay with. People ask me what changed over the 16 years that allowed us to finally pass the bill. A lot of attention was given to the kids in Parkland who rose up and raised their voices, and we cannot in any way underestimate the importance of that. They were incredibly eloquent speakers on behalf of their generation. But I want to emphasize one other thing that really did make the difference here in Illinois. It was more after Sandy Hook, the groups that stood up and said, we're not going to take this, the parents, the moms, who said we need to act. And when Parkland happened, those groups had reached a level of political sophistication and maturity that we were able to capitalize on that. So moms demand action. Thank you. I do want to turn this over now to my partner, my House sponsor, my state representative, Kathy Willis. There you are.
Thank you, everyone. It is an honor to be here today to see the hard work that's come through. But before I do that, I have to add a little personal tidbit. When I talked to my mom last night and told her where we were going to do the gun signing, she goes, you know, I went to school here. And so my mother was a graduate of Young High School 65 years ago, but it's still close in her heart. So I guess in a way, Principal, you can count on me as one of your alumni by proxy. So I think that's great. I was honored to pick up the torch in the House. Senator Harman has worked this for 15 years, 16 years. I've worked it for the last 3.5, 4 years. It has been a very difficult bill to work because not only do we have a lot to overcome, we have the heartache of hearing the stories of why it's important. And those stories and those grassroots action that we get from survivor families, from families that have been affected by this, from somebody that knew somebody somehow or other, or there's their child, their spouse, their sister, their brother, those are the stories that can stand with us today and take credit for this, because it is those stories that helped convince our fellow legislators that enough is enough and it's time to make some changes. And that's what I'm really proud to say, that I was able to be the vessel for you in this. The National Rifle Association continues to reject common sense gun reforms that would save lives, but you guys don't. And that's the most important thing. We know that gun violence affects families throughout the nation, and certainly throughout the state of Illinois. This is a first step to stopping that, so that we can stop other families from having to go through the same tragedies that many of you have done. This was a bipartisan bill. We were able to get people from both sides of the aisle together to talk about the needs of the community. It's not a Democrat or a Republican. It's not an upstate or a downstate. It's not a city or suburban or urban, rural problem. It's everybody's problem. And I am proud to stand before you to say we're making a difference today. So thank you so much. With that,
I'm here merely to say thank you, because this is indeed personal for me. Superintendent Johnson knows well enough. I light up his phone all the time. I called him 2 weeks ago after the daughter of a childhood friend was shot on New Year's Eve. I called him 7 days ago when there was a shooting on my block, a double shooting on my block. And I hate to say it's not the first time that I called him about a shooting on my block. So when I advocate alongside Don Harmon, who's been a champion, who's refused the answer no, who knows the meaning of perseverance, I do so with a personal drive behind it. And for those of you all survivors who've turned pain into purpose and removed people from office, who refuse to embrace policy that would keep our streets safe. Thank you. Governor Pritzker, if this is a signal of what is yet to come, man, am I excited about your tenure. Let me finally say, a couple of days ago when I accepted the role as, to be your next Attorney General, I indicated that no public official in the state should not take on the responsibility for doing something about the violence that we experience in our state, and that includes the Attorney General's office. And so while we take a major step here with gun dealer licensing, we realize that we have to do the work that Mayor Emanuel and the city has been doing with regards to tracing guns, not only in the city of Chicago, but throughout the state. And we realize that there's a trauma caused by the gun violence. And we have to engage in dealing with that trauma. Because if we don't deal with that trauma, the folks who are victims could evolve into being perpetrators of that same violence. And so our work continues. And the Attorney General's office will be alongside you in that work. But I want to thank the advocates and those who have been steadfast in this effort. And one who I've seen consistently along that way is Delphine Cherry.
Thank you, Attorney General Kwame Raoul. Good morning.
Good morning.
Today is a good day.
Yeah.
My name is Delphine Cherry. I'm a Brady board member, Illinois Council Against Handgun board member. I'm with Purpose Over Pain, and Father Pfleger. I can't leave him out. And I'm here today as a mother who has lost 2 of my own children to gun violence. My daughter Thaisa was just 16 when she was murdered, and my son Tyler, who was just 20, both were victims of the state gun violence problem. Today is a happy day for many people across Illinois because Governor J.B. Pritzker is signing the bill that will reform bad apple gun dealers that would perpetrate our state gun violence problem. However, it's also a sad anniversary for me and my family. 27 years ago today, my oldest daughter, Thaisa Abney, was doing what a good kid does. She went to the movies with some friends. As she was leaving the movie theater, a 14-year-old boy with an illegal gun started firing in the crowd. He was trying to hit a rival gang member, but missed. The bullet ricocheted off a building and hit Thaisa in the head, killing her instantly. I'm trying to take my time here. Thaisa was a really good young woman. She was 16. She had dreams. She was a senior in college, and she decided she wanted to be a nurse at an early age. To know her was to love her. She was a role model for her two sisters. She was a role model for me also. She showed me what hard work paid off. And when my Thaisa died, I was pregnant with my youngest, Tyler Randolph. Tyler was a great kid. He was so full of life, had so much potential. Then 20 years after gun violence took my daughter, it took Tyler. He was killed outside my home 3 days before Christmas. Murder is still remain unsolved. Sadly, too many parents have to experience the pain and anger that comes from losing a child to gun violence. Since Thaisa and Tyler's murder, I have become committed to doing everything I can to stop gun violence. Part of that work has been advocating for the law to stop the flow of guns to dangerous people like the ones who killed my two children. One of those laws is gun dealer certification. This bill will close the loophole that gun dealers exploit every day to sell illegal guns that are used to shoot children that looks just like mine. While no law will stop all gun violence or bring back Thaisa or Tyler, this law will save lives. If we can save even one life from being taken by illegal guns, then we have made progress. This bill is a product of the work of so many people over the course of many years, and I want to thank them. I want to thank Illinois Council Against Handguns, the Illinois Gun Violence Prevention Coalition for their work to get this bill passed and signed. I want to thank Mark Walsh, Colleen Daly, Kathleen Sanders, GPAC. I want to thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank Sarah Kay, because I can't pronounce her last name, for her leadership of the Illinois Gun Violence Prevention Coalition. The Illinois Gun Violence Prevention Coalition is a group over 160 organizations from all over the state that have come together to advocate for common sense gun laws. The coalition is so strong, and we will continue to advocate for better gun policies. I also want to thank the survivors and activists who have said enough is enough and demanded change. We have stood together for over 3 years asking Springfield to pass this law. And I know because I've been there for 3 years. And at this time, we have done a lot. We have, the coalition have collected over 50,000 petition signatures in support of this bill, which we have brought with us today. We have also made thousands of phone calls and made what feels like thousands of visits to Springfield. I should know that. Trying to get this gun dealer certification passed. And our work has paid off. I also want to thank the bill sponsors, Senator Don Herman, thank you, and Representative Kathleen Willis, thank you. They are truly gun violence prevention champions. They are what real leaders look like. Lastly, and thank you, Governor Pritzker, for signing this bill into law. Thank you for letting me stand. Thank you for standing up for the NRA and for signing a bill that will save many lives. I want to personally thank you for allowing me to speak on this very important day. Thank you for allowing me to honor my daughter Thaisa memory with action on her anniversary of becoming an angel. I know she's looking down, smiling at all of us, and said we did it.